In the Nigerian community, a child's business is everybody else's business. And that's because Nigerians have the concept that the village raises the child. But what happens when the village doesn't understand the concept of the neurodivergent spectrum and the child is on the spectrum? That was my childhood, and in this video I'm going to talk about how my ADHD traits were misunderstood and led me to being labelled as a disobedient and wayward child. As a child, one of my most notable ADHD traits was my fidgeting. I could not sit still. I'm even fidgeting now as we're making this video, but I couldn't sit still. I couldn't stand in one place. I couldn't help but move around, play with my fingers. And Nigerians breathe respect. Nigerians breathe respect. Respect is a very big thing within the Nigerian community. So when an elder would tell me to stay in one place, I couldn't physically stay in one place because my brain wanted me to fidget so badly. It was a war between my brain and the instructions that the people around me were giving me. This often led me to being labelled as someone who did not have any home training, and because I was labelled as the child that didn't have any home training, it actually had a negative impact on my family because it looked like my family were not raising a proper Nigerian girl. But research shows that fidgeting is actually beneficial for people with ADHD, and fidgeting often helps individuals with ADHD when they are in overstimulating environments.
The student there on the left has ADHD, but here's the thing, it's the same kid on the right. The difference, a math video versus Star Wars. Now you may think that explains it. The math is boring and his brain is tuning out. The movie is far more engaging. But researchers say this study found the exact opposite.
When the kids with ADHD move their most, they actually do their best cognitively.
So you're listening to this, you can understand how fidgeting and not paying attention can be interpreted as a lack of discipline or disrespect. But when you understand how the ADHD brain works, you understand that fidgeting is actually essential, especially for a child with ADHD to better navigate overstimulating circumstances within social settings. Another ADHD trait I displayed in my childhood that was seen as disrespect was my forgetfulness. I had such bad memory as a child. Even looking back at it now, I'm surprised I even survived. But I had such bad memory that when people would give me instructions, I would typically forget the instructions. So when I would tell them I have forgotten, like when you tell me to do something and I've forgotten, they'll be like, but how can you forget? It was something very simple. Yeah, it's possible. I forgot. I generally just forgot. So I remember one time, right? I had this auntie that would always call to speak to my mum or send a message to my mum around 4 p.m. But my mum worked 9 till 5. So I would be home from school by then. So when she would call, she would always give me messages to pass over to my mum. And most of the time I'll forget. Sometimes I remember, but most of the time I'll forget. And I would get in trouble for it because it's like, what's wrong with your child? I tell her to tell you stuff. She doesn't listen to my words. But I generally just forgot. But looking back at it now, she knew my mum worked 9 till 5. So why didn't you just call her after working hours? Why did you rely on the child? But that's another topic. ADHD impairs working memory. So it is not intentional, it's actually neurological, and this is why ADHD is also considered a disability.
Working memory is an executive function that's housed in the prefrontal area of the brain. It's where information is temporarily stored for recall and processing. For kids with ADHD, that section of the brain hasn't fully developed yet. The result?
It's a bit like a cognitive house of cards. You can give them one instruction and it's no problem. They're able to do it and pay attention. But if you give them too many, it actually collapses the whole system and they end up not remembering anything.
Another trait that was seen as disrespect that I displayed in my childhood was I had issues with certain food textures. So like sliminess of okra. Mind you, I love okra soup now, but then like sliminess of okra, or when food was not presented in a way that I could process, I would legit have a breakdown because I couldn't eat the foods. And essentially, because I lived in the UK, then I lived in Nigeria for a bit, the elders that I was staying with at the time, or the aunties and uncles I was staying with at the time, took it as me thinking I was better than them because I was used to British cuisine. But that was not necessarily the case. Is the fact that I was somewhat a picky eater, and certain foods, or the way certain foods were presented to me, I had to eat it in a certain way. And if I couldn't eat the food in a certain way, then I wouldn't be able to eat. But as you can imagine, it was seen as disrespect. A lot, it was a lot. And in Nigeria, food is a cultural cornerstone, and refusing to eat foods that someone's giving to you, considering the fact that in Nigeria there's a lot of poverty and a lot of people can't actually get food, is a big sign of disrespect. It's a massive sign of disrespect. So my dislike for certain food made me seem like I was ungrateful, and I even got labelled Oyibo girl sometimes. Sensory processing issues are common amongst people with ADHD, and it's a challenge that people with ADHD deal with on a day-to-day basis. It isn't about being picky, it's a physical discomfort. Another major ADHD trait I displayed as a child that was seen as disrespect and waywardness was my lack of focus. Growing up, I struggled with focus, especially when it came to schoolwork. So because of this, it took me a lot longer to, get my grades up compared to my peers. And the Nigerian community, education is everything to us. And my lack of concentration gave the people around me the impression that I did not care about my education, and therefore I did not care about my future. So the people in my community, and not my parents, because my parents were aware of my diagnosis and they did well with it, but the people in my community thought I wasn't going to amount to anything in life because I could not pay attention. I was struggling to focus. That's a massive label to actually put on a child, and labeling theory is like a big thing, and that's another video for another day. But you can imagine what it was like to be viewed as someone who is worthless and is going to be useless by the elders around you just because you're struggling to focus, and it's a trait that you have no control over.
Jane Arbor didn't want her son to be on camera. She says kids with ADHD are often punished and labeled as unmotivated or lazy because they can't sit still.
These kids are the experts in what they need and how they best learn. And instead of getting in their way, we should get out of their way and support them.
I even remember teachers saying I wasn't putting in enough effort because they felt like I wasn't focusing and I was intentionally not concentrating, but that was not necessarily the case. I just couldn't concentrate because of my ADHD traits. As I'm reflecting on this in my adulthood, looking back, I can see that my ADHD traits completely clashed with the expectations of what Nigerian community wants from a child.
I really hope that this sort of shifts or starts to shift our understanding of what it looks like for people to pay attention.
Especially in a community where respect and discipline is the core and the center of everything. The Nigerian community does not understand the concept of being on the spectrum, and the mental health conversation is still very new within the Nigerian community. That's why I believe it's time for us to educate ourselves and approach these conversations with compassion and not judgment. Have the people around you also misunderstood you because of your neurodivergent traits? Leave a comment in the comment section and let's get the discussion going. Please like, subscribe and share so we can raise awareness